Let's cross the studio. James Creedon, revved up, ready to go with Media Watch. Getting to you, sir. Now, started with something, well, fairly sombre, of course. Mohammed Morsi's death in custody in Egypt. The UN calling for an inquiry, an independent investigation into what happened. His supporters saying that his death was a result of what they described as torture, the bad conditions that he was kept in. Egypt's, obviously, government has a different story to tell. Tell us what you've been finding.
Lots of comment on this in the last 24 hours on social media, Mark. This is Belle True, who is Middle East correspondent for the independent newspaper in the UK. She's been tweeting a lot about this because she's covered the whole thing since the beginning, back to 2011. Witnesses said Morsi was left slumped on the floor of his courtroom cage for at least 20 minutes before being given first aid. He had complained of a lack of treatment for several illnesses. Friends and colleagues calling it murder. The UN is calling for transparent probe. So, of course, all of the ingredients of a death that would trigger a huge amount of controversy and upset. Belle True continuing here with a long thread that's worth reading for people interested in her take on things. Mohammed Morsi's legacy is a complex one, and we should not forget the grey shades. Democratically elected, ousted by a coup, disappeared, treated so badly in jail it likely amounted to torture. But his year in power was also a tricky and sometimes dark chapter in Egypt's history, and she goes on to detail that. On her Facebook then, she shared this almost exactly 7 years ago to the day. Facebook memories reminded her of these photos that she had taken in Tahrir Square celebrating Morsi's win in the 2012 presidential election. So 7 years, a lot has happened in Egypt since then. This is Evan Hill, formerly of Human Rights Watch, also commenting on this in a tweet that was shared a lot online. The death in custody of former Egyptian President Morsi should be understood in the context of the Egyptian authorities' systematic and years-long isolation and mistreatment of tens of thousands of political detainees. So I suppose it's put the spotlight on that. Lots of comments then from Mohammed Morsi sympathisers, angry with the African Union, with the UN, condemnation of Sisi. What did the United States and champions of democracy do when Egypt's first elected president got deposed? So it's reignited all of those frustrations. This is a well-known Egyptian footballer by the name of Abu Trika, who is just one of the many who have been sending prayers and good wishes to Mohammed Morsi, his family and others. There's lots of tributes online, Mark. Indeed, there's the personal loss and then obviously the more public aspects of this, and clearly we're seeing both sides of that there. On that public issue, though, with Morsi's death, politicians chiming in. That's right. And Turkey's president, chief among them, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. That's right. Just a quick look at some of those reactions. Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Twitter basically calling Mohammed Morsi a martyr. One might say that he's perhaps using the moment as well to be in the spotlight as a leader of the Muslim world, but certainly I'm sure some of those thoughts are very sincere from his part as well, calling Morsi a martyr on Twitter, and it's been picked up elsewhere. And of course there was a ceremony in Istanbul, funeral prayer in absentia with Erdogan very much present. Then in Pakistan, for example, Bilal Bhutto Zardari of that political dynasty over there, Pakistan People's Party, saying this: "You will remember my words, do not kill the lions of your nation, lest you will encounter a similar fate by the dogs of your enemies." So it really ignited so much comment across the Muslim world and well beyond. Next, images of Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, causing some questions over her well-being. I think we have these images, so if we could roll these pictures of Angela Merkel this afternoon in Berlin. This, Mark, was when she was with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. You can see here that she really did not look well at all during the national anthems being played. It looked like she could, in fact, collapse. She steadied herself at one point with her hands, but people quite concerned about the health and well-being of Angela Merkel on the strength of those images, and it did generate a huge amount of comment and speculation online, as is often the case when politicians seem a little bit unwell. It's happened to Jean-Claude Juncker, it's happened to Hillary Clinton and others in the past, and then of course people see that as a symbol of their stability or their power, whatever. And of course Angela Merkel is having political difficulties at the moment, so these are images she'd rather have avoided. Deutsche Welle talking about how, well, relaying that the video is authentic. People were kind of, they double-checked that. And Merkel, they did then speak to the media and said, look, there was too much heat, got overheated, drank 3 glasses of water, and I was fine. Der Spiegel says it did happen to her a few years ago as well in Mexico. She seems to be perhaps a bit sensitive to the heat. But of course, body language of politicians is so scrutinised nowadays that images like that go viral fast. So let's hope Mrs. Merkel, Frau Merkel, remains in good health. Yes. Finally,
Auto mechanics recreate Renaissance paintings.
I just figured after...
I had to read that slowly because,
Yes.
this one seems a bit surreal.
I just figured after 2 heavy stories about politics and
You can
health
do
and
whatever you wish, sir. We love you that much.
Let's turn to sad and useless. Change of tone. But this isn't sad, actually. This is quite great, I think. It's a photographer called Freddie Fabrice. He always wanted to pay homage to the Renaissance masters. So for some reason, he decided to take mechanics and have them pose as Renaissance paintings. It's kind of a bizarre juxtaposition, but I think it works. And then, of course, you have to have a few pairs thrown in.
Fantastic. Oh, it's fantastic.
And this is my favourite one. It's kind of I don't know what's going on there. Spanner in the works, but it works. Or a wrench in the works.
Spanner in the works. We'll go with that one. James, thank you very much indeed. Great to see you, James.
Thanks, Mark.
Renaissance mechanic paintings. Fantastic stuff. Thank you, James. James.